All right, people, welcome to this episode of the Visionary Experience. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Miss Jessie Thiel of Pearson Smith Realty right here, live and direct in the DMV. Listen, this promises to be a very insightful conversation. Let me tell you, Jessie is full of energy. She has great experience just in terms of her career and just in terms of her life. So this will definitely be a podcast you don't want to miss. So Jessie, welcome so much to the Visionary Experience. How are you this morning?
Hey, thank you. Doing well. It's
Oh,
morning-ish. It's morning, so
yes, it is.
still kicking in a little bit, but yeah, doing well.
Yes,
Doing really good.
fantastic. We want the podcast to be timeless, but in terms of right now, it's the morning. So we need to we
Yes.
need to get it up and get it going, right?
I sip on coffee until about maybe 2 o'clock, 2:30. Like I'm not a fast coffee drinker. I
Mhm.
just will continuously make it to the microwave and just keep
Yes.
going.
There you go. Well, you're efficient, let me tell you that. So,
I-
a lot of miles to the gallon.
Exactly. Yep. Just make one huge, ginormous cup. I mean, this is huge. And then I just keep like, I guess it's better than scrounging in the refrigerator every, 20 minutes. I just go back, warm it up a little bit, and then keep
Mhm.
sipping on it. So,
There you go. I
still
like
my
it.
morning.
So, yes. All right. So, for our audience, can you just share a couple things? Okay, where you're from, all right, and originally what got you interested in the real estate industry?
Oh man. It's everyone I think it's great, but I also a lot of people look at me and they're just like, how do you go from one to the next? But
Okay, so explain that. Right.
once I start talking. So originally I'm from Michigan. I was actually born in Jersey, and then we moved to Michigan when I was very young. And then I moved down to this area 2013. So uh, math, 8 years ago. Um, um, woo. So I moved down here about 8 years ago, and um, I've always loved. So when I was in high school, I was really into computer aided design. I loved architecture. I loved interiors. But where I really like took off was CAD, was computer aided design. So
Okay.
I went to Central Michigan for a few years and started off, declaring a major in like automotives, doing computer aided design for exteriors. I loved that. Um, and then just kind of college wasn't for me, but I love the design of things. I love the look of things. And also what I really hated, because when you're in high school, you get like your 1 or 2 hours of class, and then you get to like walk around. And maybe
Mhm.
this is like a big signifier of ADHD. I don't know. But
Mm,
you get to sit down for a few hours and then you go and you do something different. And I love that. But when I got to college and I was doing it all the time, I was like, I love what I do, but I can't be behind this little desk in this little room working. It wasn't for me.
right.
Um, so right out of college, I started working at a hair salon doing makeup. And this is where everyone goes, well, how do you get from here to here?
Right.
But um, it's the look of something, right? It's the physics, it's the lines, the aerodynamics, it's the color, it's highlights and contours. And so when you're talking about the exterior of a vehicle, and of course, Michigan, Detroit, everyone is in
Absolutely.
automotives. So I love it. I love cars. I love fast things. Um, but I started working at this wonderful, wonderful salon and started doing makeup. And then really started to realize when we were doing a lot of print work for magazines and local magazines and fashion shows and things like that. Like we would travel, the partner that I had and I, we would go to Chicago. We would do photo shoots for, advertisements. And but I noticed that everyone or not everyone, but the majority of girls that we were doing had really, really bad skin.
Hmm.
And so, of course, my science brain, because math, not so much, as we just found out. But science, I love science. So it kind of evolved over the years, and I got into aesthetics and I got into medical aesthetics, and I really like disease, disorder, things like that. So
That's perfect
when
for
I'm,
where we are. Yeah.
yeah, so when I moved down here, I started working at a dermatology office in medical aesthetics. A
Hmm.
lot of disease, disorder, kind of medical
Mm.
assistant stuff. Got to assist in some, like, when you think of Dr. Pimple Popper, that's kind of what we did. So
Okay.
you're in surgeries and you're removing things, and it's super cool. But again, I really struggled with being in that office, being kind of the 9 to 5 or 7:30 until 4, and then quality of life goes down, especially in this area, as everyone knows,
Hmm.
with traffic. So you're in the car at 4:30 in the evening for another 2 hours.
Oh, yes.
So um I did that for a while, and it was killing me. So I went to my best friend Lindsay Smith, and she had gotten into real estate for, I think she was in for about a year.
Okay.
Um, but I went to her because I did what most people do when they say they want to buy real estate. Is they say, well, I want to buy a house and I want to fix it up, and then I want to rent it out, or I want to flip it. Literally everybody says that. But I wanted something to do because in the summertime, you're contraindicated for a lot of those procedures that I was doing, right? A lot of those elective procedures or skin resurfacing or things, chemical. There's just a lot of stuff that you can't do. So summer for me was slow, but I was still in the office. And so you're sitting there and you're in your treatment room, or just you see the sun shining and you're like, "Ugh," at least for me.
Right.
So I went to Lindsay and I had dinner, and I was like, what is it going to take for me to invest in real estate? Let's go over all this. I want to pick your brain. And we were about halfway through, and she just looked at me and she's like, why don't you do real estate? And of
Hmm.
course,
Okay.
immediately in your mind, you start to go, well, I've gone through college, gone through school, so I
Hmm.
still have student loans. Like, what do you mean you want me to like drop everything and be a realtor? And she's like, well, let me ask you this, what do you like about your job? I was like, oh, I love my patients. I love my clients and my patients. She's like, good. That's all you need. Like
There you go.
that's it.
That's right.
That's what, you can learn the house stuff, everything else, but that's what you're good at. And so I just was like, okay, well, I'll dabble. I'll do it part-time or something.
Hmm.
So started taking the courses, started kind of dedicating Sundays to just like banging out online courses and stuff. Took the exam. And, when you're finding a, like, what's different about real estate as any other job is that you interview, well, not any other job, but most of them, is that you interview brokers. Who do I want to work for? Things like
Right.
that. Like, why do you want me, rather than, do I fit? So,
Hmm.
um, but anyways, so when I sat down with Eric Pearson, he's a phenomenal person. And so he's like, I just want you to be prepared that most people have two jobs, and it takes the average realtor, 8 months to get their first either sale or buy. Like, you really got to stick it out. So then that's where most people kind of move. Like, they take the courses, they spend all this money getting their licensure and,
Right.
your associations and all these kind of things. And then you don't make any money for 8 months. So he's like, I'm just preparing you. And typically it's, 8 months. And then the next year, you might double that, or, you know, and I was like, oh, okay. All right. That's, I can do that. That'll, in my mind, I'm like, okay, wintertime, busy time, summertime, that puts me, I'm doing that math. And I got my license in the end of October
Okay.
in 2019. And then I closed my first home sale on December 4th, 2019.
All right. So let's
Yep.
back that up. So let's do some math here, right? So you got your license in October of 2019. You
Hmm.
closed your first deal in December of 19.
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
Mr. Pearson said it'll take 8 months, but Jesse said no, it'll only take 2 months. And
Yep.
depending upon when you got your license in October, it might have been a month and a half. So that's fantastic. So let me ask
Yeah.
you this. Were you still working full time when you were doing this, or did you completely take
Yes.
the plunge?
No, I definitely wanted to make sure that I had what that I wouldn't say backup, but I wanted some
Mhm.
type of stability. It's a very risky thing when you've gone your whole life or most of your
Absolutely.
life with that steady 2-week paycheck and your hours and all of that. I was like, "Oh God, this is great." You see all those numbers, like, you see all those numbers on your first
Right.
paycheck and you're like, "Oh, I'm good." But what happens if you never get another deal for the remainder of those 7 months?
Right.
So I did, and it was very, very, very difficult. I will say that was a lot of anxiety for me, um, mainly because when that phone rings and you don't pick it up, you literally lose your mind, you know? You're just like, "Oh my god, it's a client and they need me, and I'm in the middle of this hour-long procedure, and they're gonna think I'm the worst person in the world." But again, you're starting off and you don't
Right.
know, and you're just like, what happens if the phone rings and someone says, "Hey, I want you to sell my $3 million house?" You just
Mhm.
come up with all these these crazy scenarios.
Right. Right.
Um, but it was very stressful. And then I started to take hours down.
Mhm.
Um, I started to go to uh part-time. And then, now granted, this between December and between like March, April, there's only a few months in there. So in those few months, I had 2 or 3 more sales. So I was feeling very good.
Mhm.
But I also was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm already super stressed and I just have like one closing a month if I want to explode. And it was both a blessing. It really was. So, quarantine, blessing and a curse,
Mm.
right? 2020.
That's right.
Blessing because obviously our office is closed. So, like, at least for a little while, we were still deemed obviously a necessity. But, you have 6 providers and there could only be one provider at a time because each provider has one client in the room and one in the waiting room. So, with these restrictions, I mean, our my hours went down to 1 day a week. And so
Really? Wow.
it was kind of like a forced 1 day a week kind of thing. And then eventually, I was like, I'll see you after quarantine. Because at that point it was just like 30 days, right? 30 days or
Mhm.
60 days, whatever it was when we first entered in all of this. And we're like, oh, we'll be back up and running in no time.
Right. Right. I
All of
remember
us.
that. Yes.
So, um, at that point, and then as everyone knows, 2020 real estate just exploded. So it really was like I dipped my toe in the water in December, and then someone came up behind me and pushed me in the pool. Like it's
Yeah.
like one of those where you're just
Yep.
so it was a curse, and a lot of people really, you know, 2020.
Right.
But for me, it was like, oh, you thought that you were just gonna no. And I just dove head in, and then 2020, as we all know, for real estate was insane. And then when we started to go back to the office, I was like, yeah, I was just thinking to myself, like, one, there's no way I can do this. I can't do both. Um, and I did. I stuck around probably a little bit longer than I should. I still tried to make 1 day a week work,
Okay.
but there were too many times and episodes where I would feel, my watch or my phone ring, and I'd look down and I'm like, oh my God, I know for a fact that that's a client who's contacting me about selling their house or things like that. So was probably another, oh my gosh, 8 or 9 months, right?
Hmm.
We went back, or I started doing the 1 day a week in July. So yeah, actually it was about 10 months where I just tried doing 1 day a week, and I stayed because I loved my clients. And it's also a great pipeline too, right?
Right.
It's
Well,
good to have.
this is a really good though story and example, right, about your journey because like you had mentioned before, so many realtors or people who are coming to work as agents are what's called dual career, right? And your transition is really interesting because it's real. Like you need that steady paycheck. You were loyal to your job. You were there, but I can see the slow transition out of the office, but not quite there. And given the fact that last year was an anomaly, right? So at what point did you actually resign and go full time into being a realtor?
June 28th of this year.
Oh my goodness. It's not like
Yeah.
when I met you or something like that.
Yeah.
Did we have lunch the day after you resigned?
It's something like that.
I
I
feel like
mean,
it.
I really did. Like
Mhm,
I guess what makes me so different than either some realtors, most realtors, is that
mhm,
I care so much about the client that I had clients that I was like, I would see them on my books. They had booked like a month in advance or 2 months in advance, and they had they'd done everything that I told them to do. If we're
mhm.
in a 6 month long regiment of treatments, I was like, oh, I can't leave her. I can't do that. I
Right,
can't,
right,
even though I could have. For me, it was like, oh God, okay, so I'll just do this. And I was booked 2 to 3 months in advance. So I just kind
mhm,
of kept scooting that line back.
mhm.
But it really did. It got to a point where I just couldn't do both. And it was really stressful for me. And so
Right,
I was like, are you doing this because of them? Or are you doing this because of you? Because if you're doing it literally for them, you will never get out of here. And I was going to work, and I love the people I work with, but I was like high highly anxious because I was like, "Oh God, I'm gonna be here for 8 hours, and what happens if, and what happens if?" And it kind of kept happening,
right.
where I would literally be in a treatment room, and I'd know that we had a 3 hour long treatment, and I was like, "Uh-oh, like if something comes in, and I don't want to do that to the business owner that I work with, the owner of, the office, because that's not
Right.
fair to her to have a provider that isn't all in. And
Mhm.
then it's also my clients, and they don't deserve to have someone who doesn't respond to them or, send addendum in a timely manner. And it really
Right.
was just like, okay, you're not, you gotta.
Yeah.
So that's my real estate journey.
Well, I tell you, there's a couple things there. Well, there's a lot to, in the podcast world to see unpack, right? But you are walking the fence, and I think from our conversations, I'd shared that with you, and for those who don't know, I had a very similar experience, working for the federal government for several years, and very similarly, just realizing that okay, my time is done, and I have to go full time into where my passion is and what I truly do love. And so you have to really consider what's going to be the wisest course of action. You just do. You don't want to make decisions as an adult that are going to just put you in a bad spot you know
Yeah.
and so I think it sounds like definitely for you, you really did ease your way out. And so for you now, that it's been a few months, you've been completely totally within real estate. What's keeping you motivated? Like what is your drive, like every single day? Because now this is your profession, this is your source of income, this is what you do. So, you know, what's your motivation and what's your inspiration that you push toward every single day?
Oh God. Um, a
Mhm.
lot of different things.
Okay.
I, you've got kind of the goals that you put down for, like 2020 or 2022
Mhm.
or 2020. Oh my God, 2021, 2022. You kind of have those goals in mind, travel, things like that. Also, um, again, it's still the clients. It's always going to be the clients.
Right.
Um, I think it's just that hunger to learn. I really like it is. It's a hunger to learn, and I'm experiencing this world of I have a lot of freedoms, but
Mhm.
also with those freedoms comes instability, I guess is a great way to put it, is you can do all these things and you can work from the beach, you can, shut off your phone for a day. Like you literally don't have to show up if you don't want to show up,
Hmm.
you know?
It's a great
No
point.
one's no one is forcing me in my house in my office right now to do work. I have
Mhm.
deadlines. I have, some addenda that are out, some contracts, some things that have like settlement dates, but no one is forcing me to work. So I guess for me, it's like with this freedom comes, I don't know, and we'll put it as watching a toddler learn how to walk, you
Mhm.
know? Like I'm stumbling around finding different things that I can do, and that's exciting.
Right. Well, you know what? That leads me to the next thing that I wanted to ask you, actually, because essentially being new, being newer in the field, right?
Mhm.
Even though you don't have decades of experience, being newer, what would you tell the next Jesse? What would you tell the next person who may have a similar story, a similar experience to you, who is thinking of, okay, going into 2022 of doing the exact same thing that you're doing? What couple pieces of advice or what thoughts would you share with them given what you've learned so far?
Never say no.
What
Never
do you
say
mean by
no.
what do you mean by that?
So the way that I mean, usually I'm a planner. I'm a
Mhm.
planner. I'm very hard on myself. That's a big self-realization. It's a lot of time in
Mm.
therapy
Okay.
to be able to
Appreciate the
say that.
vulnerability. Yes.
Sure, yeah. I'm very hard on myself. So I'm one of those people that I like things to be set up and perfect when I begin. Um, and we all know that that doesn't work that way, but it makes me feel like I'm in control. We're going to
Mhm.
get real deep in the psyche right now, you know, but and I do. So with Pearson Smith, actually, Pearson Smith has asked me to be a mentor for Maryland, meaning any new agent that comes on will do their first buy and sell with me. Um,
Congratulations.
because oh, thank you. Yeah, I was
Yes.
there's 6 agents, and we all kind of there's two for Maryland, and then there's an overlap, and then there's two, so there's not just one. But I was chosen, and
Mhm.
I couldn't be more thrilled. But here's why I say never say no is just do it. Like the
Mhm.
way that I learned was I effed up a lot.
Mhm.
You're gonna make a ton of mistakes, but don't say no to something that's an opportunity because you have no idea what you're doing or you're terrified. So the way that I got my first deal is I was for the first time ever, I was up at like 5 o'clock in the morning for some reason. I just could not sleep. And of course, the thing that you're not supposed to do is wake up and look at your phone.
That is so
And I
true.
and I
That's real
did.
talk.
I woke up and I was like, I can't sleep. So I looked at my phone and another agent had just posted like I mean, literally at 4:59 in the morning, I need an
Mm.
agent. I need a Maryland agent for Annapolis. Um, you know, who's like, who would you recommend? And I was like, oh my God, Annapolis. Like, I haven't even done like a standard G contract. I didn't even know that there was like G car and MAR. Like, remember, I'm literally 2 weeks in.
Mhm.
I don't even think I was a member of G car yet. Um, I mean, I was just like, okay, we're doing it. We're doing
Right.
it. But I just was like, okay, I'll do it. And to this day, they're still one of my favorite clients. They're the most
Oh.
amazing people in the world. But when I tell you, I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely none. I didn't know about the addenda and jurisdictional addendum and timelines and how to even write a contract. I went to Lindsay and I was like, what do I do? And she's like, well, the Virginia contract's like 9 pages, and the Maryland contract, this one's like 36. So I
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
199 pages. Listen, sorry, Maryland.
Oh my God. So we just
It's
kind
crazy.
of,
Yeah.
I just got help. I would ask a ton of questions. I bothered so many people. I was just like, I don't know. I have no idea. And thankfully, the listing agent was a super sweet lady where she was
Mm.
like, can you please send over these addendum? And I was like, oh, my bad. Sorry, I forgot. I had
Yes.
no idea. But it's not going to be perfect. And the things that I had in place when I first started, those are out the window. Those
Mhm.
processes and things and calendars and all of that, you're not going to know what you need until you start. So dive head in and don't say no. Because especially in Maryland, what is there's different contract, there's different addenda, there's different timelines, there's
Sure.
different everything. So you have to learn it all. And if you're going to wait around for that, like, oh, I've already done one in, Frederick, and I've already done one in Anne Arundel, and I've already done one
Mm.
in PG. It's just no, take
Mhm.
them all. So that's the never say no. And it worked really well for me. Like, even if I was way too busy, the second that I saw something pop up about Maryland, in our Facebook forum for needing
Mhm.
an agent, I said yes. And eventually people started recommending me. And at that point I was like, okay, awesome.
Right.
Um, so that's how I kind of became really, really, really well versed in Maryland contracts. Was I just screwed up a ton, but I didn't, I didn't apologize. I didn't try to, um, skirt my way around it. Like, if anyone looked my name up on the MLS, you can see what I've done. So just being honest and saying like, oh, why do we need this addendum? Or why can't we use this one? And hopefully you get a really good listing agent too. I've been really, really blessed to work with 98% of the listing agents or buyers agents that I've worked with, just any other agent. Um, they've been fantastic.
No, that's
So
great.
98.
No,
Um,
I appreciate that. And I
so yeah,
appreciate your humility and sharing like the lessons that you've learned because that's being real,
yeah,
right? I
yeah,
mean, it's kind of a cliche coming from last year, but and the year before, but people really do want and seek that authenticity, right? That realness, because that's what they connect with, right? Not
yeah,
with someone, necessarily being so perfect. And, even though you want things planned and you want things perfect, right?
right.
You're as I've read many times, you take the bias toward action because if you don't, and you're just sitting static, nothing's gonna happen. Nothing good's gonna happen,
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
So it's better to go ahead. Mhm.
If you're waiting for that perfect opportunity, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And
Right.
so I get that some people feel better that way. But really you have to just dive dive straight into it. And I kept telling myself, like, you're going to be embarrassed no matter what. So you might as well just go in. And you know what I mean? Like, no one likes to
Right.
be that new agent, but guess what? They were new agents too.
Right.
So if you
No.
just meet that up front and you say like, listen, I have no idea what addenda
Hmm.
you're talking about. I have no idea what, this is. Um, some people like they usually just are like, oh, okay. Like it's not a big
Right.
deal. But if you find, if you're a person who's like, oh, I'll get that to you, oh, I didn't think it's just like, I mean, that's just not how I operate. Here I
No, and that's
am,
great.
so that's
And that's
kind of,
got you where you are, if you think about
yeah.
it. Truth be told, and like if I go out to a restaurant or if I'm somewhere and I know that you can always sense when someone's new, right?
Oh,
That they're
sure.
struggling, they're fumbling a little bit. 100% of the time, I'm like, look, take your time because everybody is new at something at some point in their life, right?
Yeah.
So who am I to be angry, to get frustrated or whatever? Because I remember as a loan officer being brand new and not knowing anything and being very nervous and scared and being worried about not being able to answer questions and stuff like that. It's like we're all new at something at some point. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that,
Yeah.
because when you're open and real with these other agents, you're like, look, I'm trying here. Let's focus on the client,
Yeah,
right? And what's
exactly.
best for
The
them
the
at the end of the day.
the client is the first priority anyways.
Right.
So as long as they feel confident in
Mhm.
you, then and you're taking care of them, the deal is going to go through.
Right.
So if you are honest, like, and that's what I know, right? I was really, I felt really good about myself and being able to handle clients or speak with them or, like if they were unhappy, figuring out why they were unhappy. I mean, that's what my specialty was. All
Absolutely.
of the real estate stuff, I was going to find out. You learn along the way. So like, as long as my clients felt great, I would do everything on the back end and learn, and that's what I did. And there were a lot of things that I don't. I learned pretty fast. There were a lot of things that came up in these transactions where I had to reach out to my broker and I was like, I don't think this is right. And he's like, it's not. Yeah, it's definitely not. Like, you know, I guess I was really lucky enough to work with some people who made bigger mistakes than I did. So I
Mm.
could learn from their mistakes too. And that was great. So
No,
that,
fantastic. And so, all right, so I'm gonna put you on the spot. All
okay,
right. All right,
do
get
it.
yourself ready. All right. Client focus, right? So this is the whole premise of this.
Yeah.
You are a dual agent. Okay. You're a dual agent. So if people don't know what a dual agent is, it means you represent the buyer and the seller. So you have I don't even know. You have a property in, somewhere in Loudoun County, right?
Hmm.
$750,000. That's probably on the low end. It's probably someone's basement, but like $800,000 single family purchase. Okay. You
Okay.
are the dual agent.
Hmm.
The sellers would prefer to not have an appraisal contingency and they would prefer to not have an inspection contingency. And of course, they want top dollar. You have very well qualified, very motivated buyers who are willing to offer top dollar, but they think it's fair to have an appraisal done on the house because they want to know the value. And they think it's fair to have an inspection done on the house so they know what works or what doesn't, right?
Okay.
And they have the best offer on the table, right? Because to say that there's not a multiple offer situation is unrealistic.
Okay.
Okay. But so
Yep.
you're representing the sellers for this 850,000 or whatever purchase, and you have the buyers, you're representing the buyers who have the best offer on the table in
Okay.
comparison to the other ones. How do you navigate that, and how do you serve both sets of clients equally, knowing what their preferences are?
Oh man. Um,
Mm-hmm. This is real estate school 101. Or actually more like
well,
201.
I was gonna say, because so Maryland and well, one, I was like, well, that's not allowed. But in Virginia, isn't that dual representation? And
Mm-hmm.
then Maryland, it's dual agency.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, or something like that.
Yeah.
your fiduciary duties that you owe to every single client have to be very specific to them. So if I didn't feel that I was acting in the best interest, I would forfeit the buyer client to, or refer the buyer client to another agent. That's probably the first thing I would do, because if I don't feel good about how I made that money
Mm-hmm.
or how I was going to, if I didn't feel like I earned that fairly, it's not going to feel good when you receive it. It's kind of one of those like universal things where, like, do you feel good about how you earned this? But if I didn't do that, I would probably say that no matter what, you're not trying to produce the best offer for the seller. You're just not. You need a part of our job as an agent is to produce the best offer that protects your buyer. So, and that comes with one, making a really good connection with the seller's agent. I mean, if I'm representing the buyer, that's something that I always try to do is you ask
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of questions, and you want to create an offer off the bat that works for both buyer and seller. But always, if I'm representing the buyer in this, is what protects you? Do we have enough information if we pull a CMA to say, are you comfortable with of waiving an appraisal? If they're not,
Right. And explain to our
hard.
people what a CMA is.
Oh, comparative market analysis, that's
Okay. Thank
101.
you.
Um, well, pulling comps and saying,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know, I know that I probably didn't price the house out of it, but again,
Mm-hmm.
if my sellers were like, we have to list this for, 850 and the next door neighbor sold for 650, it's like, ugh. I guess you kind of have the knowledge of the comparable properties that you can use to the advantage of both. But if my buyer did not want to waive that appraisal, that's a hard stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard stop for me. And then if I'm representing the sellers and they're talking about, well, we don't want an appraisal, that's when you have to look them in the eye and say, you wanted to list this at 850, but realistically, I think this is where the appraisal is going to come in at. So eh, you owe them fairness and honesty to both. That's what I
Right.
would say is whatever protects the buyer or your
Right.
client the best, and then whatever you can do to help your seller see, or is that reasonable, what they're asking for and what they've presented, is that reasonable, does that put you at risk?
That's right. And I really respect your answer. I really do because in this type of it's a hard scenario. It's a hard
Oh yeah.
scenario, but at the same time, I don't know, I don't necessarily know. It's not really black and white. And when we're
Right.
working in real estate, as you've mentioned, we have to really be able to weigh what are the circumstances we're dealt with right now, and
Yeah.
how can we best mitigate them, and how can we best navigate them so that we come up with you know the best solution, right? Because I
Yeah.
can't necessarily say there's in this particular scenario that I presented you with, if there's necessarily a right or a wrong, but really, okay, what's going to be the best course of action going forward? So I think for anybody listening to what Jessie just shared, you better pick up the phone and call her, because no matter what, she is going to, I'm being serious, because
Well,
rewind the tape a little
thanks.
bit, because it's a great response,
Well,
right?
thank you.
Because you really do care, and you're not just like, well, it has to be this or it has to be that. No, it doesn't have to be, right?
Right.
You're evaluating the set of circumstances and data, right? Knowing your clients, knowing their emotions, but also knowing what the facts are with regards to the market, right? And then being able to analyze those so that you're best serving the needs of your clients in the best way.
Yeah. And here's a
No.
little success story, and it's definitely not a bragging moment, but it might be either way. Last year, I had a client and we had been we had written, they had looked in Northern Virginia, they'd also looked in Maryland,
Mhm.
and we had looked for a long time. And this was that very, very, very competitive like price point between like 450 and 550.
Okay.
And so that was a super, super competitive, possibly up to like 600.
Mhm.
So anyways, we had lost out on like two other homes, and I hate losing, not gonna lie. I absolutely hate it. Um, but Natalie and Matt, like they were like, if we don't find a house or so like get a house this weekend, we're just gonna renew our lease. And
Mhm.
it wasn't that I was like, okay, I need this money. It was, I know that they're unhappy where they are, and I know that they're ready after just being married to buy this house and they have everything in line. And so we submitted an offer on a house. And when I contacted the agent, she was like, well, right now she had something like 28 offers in hand.
Oh my gosh.
We already, and by the time that it came for the offer deadline, she had 46 offers in hand. 46.
Wow.
And I had done enough work and I had talked to her and I had prepped Natalie and Matt where, okay, you know, you're going to already start the process to start pulling from, your IRA, because we need to know how long that is. And we're going to, do all this. And
Right.
we had the lender pull, I think the company that he or that they were working with, like we pulled
Mm.
comparatives, we pulled, we got the lender involved to take a look to see if they had a program that they could pull, like one of those preliminary appraisal reports, like some
Mhm.
companies and
Right.
things like that.
Yep.
We did all of this and we ended up winning, and we were not the highest offer by quite a lot of money, but we came in with the path of least resistance and honesty and fair market value, and we ended up winning because we had all of our ducks in a row.
Mhm.
It was more than list price, but it wasn't as high as some people are willing to
For
go.
sure.
But all of those kind of were like, oh, throw money at it, throw money at it. But they had, different contingencies and things like that, or, the financial thing that you send,
Right.
to the listing agent, like that didn't look like it was riskier. And then we had the lender reach out and like introduce himself and, this is what we're working with. And it was just fairness and honesty and being prepared. And it was what
Right.
was best for Matt and Natalie. And that turned out to be the safest and best offer for the seller. And that has been where I have found success, is that I don't give a crud about the seller. I give
Right.
the fiduciary duty aspect of it is,
No,
I don't
absolutely.
know.
And congratulations to your clients and to yourself, but also to the sellers because, they really chose the best offer, you know?
Yeah.
And it's funny because when they say, okay, present your highest and best, right? It's like highest
Mhm.
and or best, right?
Yeah.
And like as you had mentioned before, there's several factors that go into that
Yeah.
really play into that. And buyers are relying upon you, Jesse, to help them to interpret, right? What's the best? How do I know
Yeah.
what's the best? Like,
Right.
explain that to me, walk me through it because they trust you. And like you said, you have that fiduciary, you have that responsibility to them, and you've been doing a fantastic job with it.
Yeah. I mean, I think
So,
when
yeah.
buyers hear highest and best, they freak
Mm,
out. And for
right.
me, I always have to reel them back and say, it's not highest and best for the seller. It's highest and best for you.
There you go. I
Period.
agree with you 100%. Well, let me tell you something. We're going to end it off on that highest and best note.
Oh my
You
God.
know, I definitely want to. Yeah, it's been a minute, so I
Wow.
definitely want to
Yeah.
have you back on. This has
Great.
been such an enjoyable conversation. I just want to thank you. And so, before we end off, how can people who are here in the DMV, how can they reach you? Either directly, social media, and we'll also put this in the podcast notes. But how can people reach you?
Cell phone. I'm definitely cell phone, obviously.
Okay.
And do you want me to tell my
I'll put
number
it I'll
out
put it
there?
in the podcast notes.
Okay.
But what about on
Okay.
social media?
Definitely cell phone, and then, I'm not big on Facebook, I'll be honest with you, but I am
Okay.
big on Instagram. I'm there often, I post a lot.
Okay.
So I would say cell phone and Instagram are the 2 best ways to get a hold of me.
Okay. Fantastic. And you serve the entire DMV area?
So, not in DC yet, I'm still
Okay.
toying with that because,
Okay.
traffic and parking is just
Keep it
and
real.
exactly. Trying to see 7 or 8 different, like, apartments or homes and parking for both you and your client. But anyways, I am all of Maryland.
Okay.
I will go as far north as, I mean, as I possibly can, as far
Mhm.
west. I've also been as far west as, like, Cumberland and stuff like that. So all
Mhm.
of Maryland and then Northern Virginia, and also doing land and, just all of it except for DC as
Okay.
of right now, but I still know great agents in DC that I work with that are very similar to me that I would highly recommend, so
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, so much for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your openness and your honesty and really sharing your journey thus far. And so I look forward to when we reconvene and we do this again, you'll have even more stories and more insight to share. All right.
yeah. No, I loved it. This was fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. So listen, people, check out again Miss Jessie Thiel with Pearson Smith Realty. Hopefully, you have enjoyed this podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you can find quality podcasts like The Visionary Experience. Love you all. Stay safe. Take care.
Thank you.